So Jason KONOPISOS, did I correct me on that spelling because I'm butchering it.
There's like about 5 ways to say it. So the anglicized version is Konopsis, like synopsis.
Konopsis, okay.
But the traditional way is Konopisos. Konopisos. So it's actually easier to say.
Is that Greek?
It is. I'm half Greek and half Cuban. So KONOPISOS-ALVAREZ.
Uh-huh. All right. So creative director, producer based out of LA. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, what you do, what you've been up to.
Well, I got into the business in the early 2000s doing stand-up comedy, actually. And then I moved into acting, and from there, kind of the Robert Rodriguez revolution for independent happened. I think people always call him the godfather of independent film, but I'm like, you're kind of forgetting about Cassavetes, who was making movies for 10 grand, you know, in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
So, but that was happening, and kind of caught the bug for making low budget independents. I remember I was doing stand-up comedy, and I wrote, I heard about Clerks and what was his movie? Not Desperado. It was
El Mariachi.
Yeah.
Clerks and Reservoir Dogs. It was like it was like the trio.
Yeah, so all those kind of spurned me on, and I was like, I could write a feature. So I wrote a comedy, and oddly enough, my grandparents lived by a pretty famous rapper in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it to him, and he was like, "That's pretty funny. I'll give you $200 for it." And I was like, I'll try and make it myself. And somehow that became I was working with this guy, and he was like, no, comedy's not the way to go. We should do an action movie, because action movies always sell. So I wound up writing this action movie in like 4 or 5 days, which I directed, starred in, first AD, did everything, killed myself. And fortunately, I was able to get a lot of cool actors who are friends to be in it. And we made it, and it pretty much just disappeared into the annals of history. And so that kind of was my first venture into directing. So since then, I'd say my main focus has been writing. I still act a lot. I still do a lot of voiceover work. I just did Final Fantasy VII Remake as a voice actor. And yeah, so that's kind of what I do. Act, write, produce. Occasionally, I haven't done stand-up in probably over a year, but I'm like a lazy stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
Like if somebody calls me and it's like the moon is aligned in the stars just right, and I don't feel so lazy, I'll go do a set, and then I won't do one for like 2 years.
Right. Well, yeah. Final Fantasy VII, the remake. Okay.
Yeah.
That just came out during the quarantine, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Yeah.
I don't know how it did. I talked to a couple people that played it, and they were blown away by it, but I don't know how it was affected by the quarantine, like financially or anything like that.
Yeah, it was probably completed right before, I think.
Yeah, like real right before.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say February. So, I don't know. I'll have to do some research and see how it did financially.
So you took the script. So who's the famous rapper, your grandparents?
I can't say.
You can't say. You can't say. A Houston rapper.
Not necessarily a Houston rapper.
He just lived in Houston. Okay.
He lived in Houston.
All right, let's start Googling, right?
No income tax. No, he's a nice guy. No income tax. So.
And what was the feature?
The feature we ended up doing was called The Waiter, and we got a lot of cool people like Dan Loria, who was the father from the Wonder Years.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Charles Durning, who's 2-time Oscar nominee.
Man,
James Handy, who's like a Broadway guy, and he's that guy you've seen all the time in movies. And Glenn Morshower, who's a character actor, who's been in Transformers. just a lot of like really cool, recognizable TV and film actors, and we did the whole thing for I think 49,000.
Yeah.
23 locations in 21 days, and just nonsense. Just
No shit.
independent, first-time filmmakers going, yeah, we can do it. Let's just, Ferrari, yeah, let's put a Ferrari in the scene. So
yeah. No,
I have to say one more person, very great friend of mine who passed away, and probably a lot of your viewers probably know him, maybe, hopefully. Bobby Zadar, Robert Zadar, from Maniac Cop, Tango and Cash.
Is that how you Zadar? I thought
Zadar.
it was just huh?
Bobby Zadar.
Zadar. Yeah. That's
Zadar,
right. Zadar. Yeah, man.
The big chin.
That infamous chin. Yeah. Maniac Cop. He was in Frogtown too, but
yep.
I always remember him as that, like he definitely had that, infamous chin, but I remember him from Tango and Cash when I think Stallone like smashed his head into like the prison bars or something, and then like fucked him up at the end of the movie somehow, or at the end of the prison scene anyway. But yeah, Robert Zadar. Wow, yeah, that's very cool.
Sadly, he passed, and he's one of those guys that's just like, famous but not really famous, but just he was a sweetheart, and his chin overshadowed. He was actually a super talented guy.
And I heard that like he had a huge, before he became this B-level superstar, B action movies or what have you. He had a huge on-stage presence in theater. Like he's Shakespearean, like classically trained Shakespearean actor in a lot of major stage roles.
A lot of people. He had a band. He played keyboard, and he was just a really interesting guy. So often people that we see, they kind of, especially the character and the D-level people, everybody kind of like has this weird way of assuming that sort of quantifies their life and their ability, but some pretty interesting people out there. And he's one of them. God bless him.
Yeah, no, I mean, just seeing them pop up in like these random during the quarantine. I mean, we'll touch upon this in a second, but for me during the quarantine, it was just binge watching 80s movies. All the things that growing up in the 80s and 90s, you would see like all these random cover boxes at Blockbuster of these B movies, and you're like, man, that's a crazy looking cover box. But I got this big blockbuster that I'm gonna, get first. But maybe when I come back, I'll get that. And then, and now I'm seeing all these movies on like Tubi and Pluto and Vudu and all these, free stream Crackle and all these other different free streaming services. I'm just like watching, and like Robert Zadar definitely popped up on a couple of these things. Man, I see. Oh, so you starred in The Waiter as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Almost killed me.
Glenn Morshower. So Glenn Morshower was on 24, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That was his big. Yeah, dude. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I love hearing like about. I love independent film stories and like collaborations of. I mean, I know who Charles Durning is. When I hear Charles Durning and Robert Zadar, like I know who that is. I don't know. Maybe half my viewers don't, but.
Yeah.
Charles Durning, wasn't he in the original When a Stranger Calls, the very first one?
I think so. I mean, he was in so many.
He was in a shitload of stuff. Yeah.
Tootsie, Best Little Whorehouse, and that is, speaking of people that had crazy lives, I mean, his life was just unbelievable. He was a teacher for the Fred Astaire School, teaching dance, boxed in Madison Square Garden on the Jack Dempsey card, went to World War II, was captured, escaped, captured again, escaped again. I mean, the guy was just amazing. And I think he's the only actor still to be nominated for both an Oscar in a comedy and a drama. I don't know if I'm getting that right. Maybe it was a comedy and a drama in the same year. But he, just very prolific career, amazing stage career that like Zadar, like people just won't be aware of, because that's kind of lost, happens, and then you can read about it on the internet, but most of those people that attended those plays are either don't remember them or dead.
Yeah. Well, back to you. Have you, well, before I go on to my next point, have you been back on set, back in the studio, back in
What's
back
funny?
in the field?
I let's see, we're here. I actually, the only job, sadly, because of everything that's happened, there was a couple projects I did, like a great little short film called Square that my friend Ryan Neely directed and starred in with me. Funny little thing. And, it, like so many other films, kind of lost its festival run. So that was kind of one thing that we were anticipating and didn't happen. But the only time I've been on set so far was I had just a day player role on General Hospital, which was funny because for a time in college, I became a General Hospital watcher, which is hilarious. But I guess everything came full circle now, and I've been on it, so I can call it a day on that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been the only thing. I was supposed to do a movie with Alex Montoya Marin, who is a director based out of Albuquerque. Just had a movie released called Millennial Bugs, which is a fun little independent film. And I think I introduced you to him. Yeah, I introduced you to him about interviewing. But we were supposed to do a film, and I just couldn't, quarantine stuff happened, and I ended up not being able to do it. That was sad, but that was the only other thing. So been pretty quiet on the actual acting front.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've been trading some emails with him, try to get him on here at some point. But so how would you say you've been impacted by the quarantine? What did you lose out on gigs, personally, professionally, production wise? How would you say you've been impacted?
My day-to-day, oddly enough, hasn't really changed all that much, because largely my day is spent emailing, on the phone, trying to do the development thing, and then doing a lot of voiceover auditions from my home studio, and then writing. So honestly, the odd thing is my day-to-day really hasn't changed, other than, I don't go out to eat as much. Sadly, I haven't lost any weight, but, so there's that. But I'd say for the first 2 months, there was just no voiceover auditions, no nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's changed. And of course, no on-camera auditions, which is, a different existence. But oddly enough, I would say, compared to a lot of other people, I've been able to cope with this better, because honestly, most of my day is spent in this room writing, as sad as that is.
No, it's not sad. Well, I mean, no, it's not sad at all. I think, it's what better opportunity for us to just take advantage of this situation and just make it a full-time job to write, or, to start editing whatever it is we have in the can. Just finish up all these passion projects, or start writing, or start prepping for all the new stuff. And I was deployed once, and on my first deployment, there was so much downtime. I prepped so much civilian work, production work. I scripted, well, I fixed up some scripts, doctored some of my own scripts, and then broke down, shot listed, storyboarded, breakdowns, all that stuff. Breakdowns and breakdown, shot listed, breakdown scheduled and shot listed, just everything. And now everything's now it's just a matter of like finding a few extra bucks, or angel investor, but even more so now, it's still on hold. So it's just like, let's just keep writing, work on like some ultra low budget couple of these web series that I have going on that we're still able to pull off because it was so low budget that even then it was even less than a skeleton crew.
Yeah.
You know, and just finding, but like you said, I mean, if that's what if the full, I'd say you're not exactly negatively impacted if this is the gig, the writing. So
yeah.
And voiceover work, even more so. I've done 2 so far. I've done, my entire acting career, I've only done 2 professional voiceover gigs. One was during the quarantine, one was prior. So
what were they?
One was an opening for one was the opening for a podcast. That was what I did. Somebody else's podcast for their internet.
Gotcha.
It was like the opening,
Yeah.
Welcome to
Squeaky and Neely's.
Something like that. Yeah. But it was way more like way more straight.
Yeah.
And natural than that. But it was like but it was like your general opening to a podcast. Because they were going way more. And then the thing years ago, it was like 2 years ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. It was a voiceover. It was a voiceover for a PSA. It was like an addiction PSA. So a number of us did voiceovers and then some screen stuff remotely. But this was before the quarantine.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of it is I think, luckily we've had this whole self-submit technology, the technology and the open, and a lot of production companies we're cutting costs just doing self-submits.
Yeah.
Remote voiceovers. If you have a decent soundbite, like I would have people want me to audition and they wanted professional equipment, and that was always kind of suspect to me. You want me to send you a very professional. You want me to send it to you for free because I know you're going to use it, right?
I've had that. I've had where they're like, "Yeah, will you audition for this? And we need this quality," and then the next thing you know, you're hearing something. You're like, "That sounds like my voice."
Mm-hmm. That happened to you?
Yeah, that's happened to me. I mean, it's I don't know where are you based?
Right out of DC, right outside DC.
So it's the industry, and sadly, in the industry, sometimes, be it intentionally or quite often just naivete of people, like intellectual property, sometimes people go, whoops, didn't realize that all the way from comedy where it's like, I didn't realize that joke was something that belonged to you. I just thought it was something I heard and then I could reuse. Or all the way to, I liked the script and we decided to use part of it or whatever. I mean, it just happens. So on every level.
Before the quarantine, for the past 5-6 years, there'd be times where if I'm driving like 45 minutes to a gig and I've got time on the road, I would have a setup and have it kind of like safe as I could. But I would sit there and do these voiceover auditions, record it to my phone, or I would do a lot of video auditions and just do takes. Then I would get to the location. Let's say it's an acting gig and I'm there on set, crewing or acting or whatever. I might take a few minutes and I'll edit it on my phone.
Yeah.
But I was using, like the little Apple, earbud. Mm-hmm. And my phone's hanging on the mount that I'd be using the GPS anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I'd be paying attention to the road, but I would be, doing this voiceover. And this was a few times. And I submitted that and they're like, oh no, we need high quality. We need to make sure you have this. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I didn't book the gig yet. If you pay me, then I will sit down. I'll take a day. If you're paying me, I'll take a day to then do your voiceover with my high quality gear, turn it on and like test and start, you always got to test it. It's all troubleshooted already and it's all set up. My whole system is like, a turnkey setup, but still I got to sit here and test it. And, and then I will sit here and I'll concentrate. I did a bunch of video submits. And so that was always suspect to me. So I always kind of purposefully send medium grade.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when people tell me, look, you know, if you're going to do a self-submit, it's got to be a flat white background. Okay. And well lit. Okay, that's fine. But then if I see myself on a commercial, there's going to be a problem. So I make sure that audio, or I make sure the lighting is not A++ grade. I make sure
Yeah.
it's, you know, like it's medium grade. You can hear the AC, you can hear the laundry machine or something. But then they book me. They're like, okay, we loved you. Now, you know, especially during the quarantine, the way people are doing things, they'll send you a kit. Or in my case, I have decent equipment. And so I could shoot something of myself, pretty decent quality for them to use. Like just recently, I don't know if you have Hulu, but you know, Hulu Sports, where they deep faked, they shot this commercial where they had like some really scrawny, they had a really scrawny white guy,
Yeah,
really scrawny black guy, and then they deep faked these two I forget the team, but they
Baker Mayfield and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah. And then there was a third guy. Some random dude was sitting on a couch and they deep faked another guy's face on the guy watching the commercial. And it's almost like they're making fun of themselves having to do this kind of new normal quarantine type production. And it's hilarious. And I think even, you know, even making fun of yourself having to produce within this in this time is it makes it endearing and even more acceptable.
I had an audition recently where in the submission notice from my agent, they said client must be willing to have a rig delivered so they can record the actual thing if booked. And I was like, I just want to get this so I can see what it is to have a rig delivered. I was like, what are they going to show up with, like a sound booth to my house? So, but you know, I guess maybe I still got it, but we'll have to see. In relation to the whole, you asked when something like that had happened. It wasn't a voiceover thing, but it was kind of a similar situation. A major mobile carrier back in, I guess it was the aughts of 2000, so like probably 2009 or 8. My agent, when I was still in Houston, so it was 2008, so I was still in Houston, Texas. My agent said, would you be willing to do, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically on the nightly news when the people are talking, and it's usually puff pieces, and up in the corner they have a video of what they're talking about. I don't know if the news even still does that, but it was like one of those things where, you know, blank telecom announced today that they are rolling out their new phone, and then they have somebody with a phone. So they wanted B-roll for all the newspapers in America, or all the news channels in America, and it was about in-flight phone service. So went down to the airport. They had a jet. I went in, and it was essentially I was booked to do B-roll. And I went in, and they started shooting, and you know, the camera started getting closer and closer, and they were like, director comes up and he's like, put the phone up to your head. And I'm like, well, you know, is this gonna be showing my face? He's like, no, we're really close on the phone. And then a still photographer comes in, and he's shooting, and I mean, I was younger. I think it paid like $300 for an hour of work. And, you know, I was like, especially back then, I was like, man, $300 for an hour of work. That's a nice day's work. Until probably 6 months later, I start getting friends in Rome being like, oh, you're on billboards, and I saw you on my flight, and you're everywhere over here. And it was a huge international campaign from Europe all the way to Asia, like Japan. And I was everywhere. And I had to get my agent to like call them up and be like, yeah, this is not what was agreed upon. And they were like, what? Oh, how'd that happen? And it, you know, it could have very much been a situation where some creative or an executive was like, hey, let's just use some stock footage we own. Went through, found an image of me, and we're like, oh, let's make this guy. He looks like he could be European or different, you know, let's use his photo. Thinking and not bothering to call legal and say, hey, do we have all the rights to use this for whatever we want? So, you know, that's an example of how that can happen. or somebody just said, hey, you know, he'll never know we did it in Europe. So
No,
he'll
never
never
see
know.
it. He'll never see it.
And
Yeah.
what's crazy is back then, that was when commercials were still like paying, like, you know, people are like, oh, it's no big deal, you get exposure. But, you know, that's the type of gig that used to pay 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000. And actors missing out on that, to most actors, that kind of job is like a life changer.
Mm-hmm.
So these giant companies that kind of like, you know, do those accidents, you know, if they don't turn around and fix them really quick, it's really bad faith.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my agent got me like $500.
Fix 500 more.
Yeah, I remember I came into her office and I was like, "Hey, have you heard from?" And I had a manager at the time who's a sweetheart, but was over the top, and he was like calling them crazy. And she was like, "Oh yeah, this company called me out of nowhere, and they wanted to, you know, use your B-roll footage." And I was like, well, what happened? What did you do? She was like, oh, I signed off on it. They already sent the check. And I'm like, and it was for like a fraction of what could have been gotten. But anyway, que sera.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, around here, there's plenty of productions around here, and there's plenty of work. You know, there's only one project. It was a commercial that I got 2 additional buyouts from afterward, but that was the run. But you know, it all depends on what, you know, really, especially out here, I guess the market. I mean, like, you really kind of have to take it, and really the exposure is going to be that extra incentive. Is people seeing you,
Yeah.
casting you from that. Yeah.
Work begets work. You know, you said
Yeah.
you've just done 2 voiceover things, but you know, off one of those, you could get 10 other jobs, and by next year you're like, I'm drowning in voiceover work. You know, what have I done to myself?
Right.
But yeah, you said that you are you in the reserves, or?
And I am in the National Guard. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So as far as acting goes, that I tell people, like, that's pretty much been my acting school. I have a background in film production, so I went to school and have a bachelor's in film and TV production. But about 5-6 years ago, I had been in the military for some time, National Guard, you know, part-time military, and that kind of fixed the whole self-consciousness part and disciplinary part and fitness part and just being confident, self-confidence, you know, self-consciousness, self-confidence. And so, and basically, in the military, I'm military police. So I just said, book me as officer this, detective that, sergeant this, major that, whatever. Like, that's typecast me. And
also you have that command presence and that understanding of protocol that the average actor's not going to be able to get, no matter how many movies they watch and think they know what it's like to carry yourself the proper way. So,
and that helps. And I have had, you know, a lot of directors and a lot of casting directors notice that, but again, no one's shooting shit right now. So it's all about just turning that around. Podcast, right? Prep.
So where outside DC are you said?
Maryland, Bethesda area.
Oh, okay. That's where I was born, actually.
Oh, okay.
So my grandfather who raised me, he adopted me at birth. He was the former vice JAG, and he was in the Pentagon for 39 years or whatever, and then retired to Houston, Texas, took a consulting job with NASA. And so I've been around the military my whole life. Everybody else in my family has been in the military. I'm sad to say I'm the only one who didn't serve. And the waiter actually was kind of about a friend of mine who was in Spec Ops and came out and kind of told me some stories. And sort of gave me a direction for that movie about a guy comes out and dealing with PTSD, but also like not having the ability to find a job. And so, yeah, that's very near and dear to my heart.
Well, where can I check? Where can I find this? Prime? Okay.
Oh, is it on Prime? I have no idea.
Yeah, it says Prime. Yeah, I might have to check that out.
Yeah. Low expectations. Low expectations.
No.
My first film.
I'm gonna have the highest of all expectations, and then so I hope I'm not disappointed. I'm rude, but we'll no, go ahead.
You'll delete this podcast. You'll be like, nah,
no,
cannot.
Not at all, man. Because listen, I mean, going on LinkedIn, you know, I've connected with a lot of folks. Pretty much this whole quarantine, spamming the shit out of LinkedIn. I'll be completely honest with you. That's how we linked up. I just spammed the shit out of LinkedIn, especially during the quarantine, because what else are we doing? So I figured now was the opportune time to, you know, relaunch. You know, this is our third attempt at a podcast, and just reach out to everybody, kind of like in, you know, in our same industries, filmmakers, actors, writers, producers, whatever. Even I even checked, you know, musicians and game developers and game designers and game producers. But you know, and I made a lot of connections, but still, you know, I get it. It's your first film, low expectations, but there's a shitload of people out there that talk a lot of shit about making a film, never do it. They never follow through.
Yeah.
They never get up the gumption to do it. All they do is talk shit. Oh, I got this film idea. I got this film idea. Oh, so write it.
Yeah.
And then 4, 5, 6 years later, oh, you remember that film idea? Man, we got to do that. I'm like, you still talking about it? Is it not written down yet? Like,
yeah.
So, I mean, you can say that all you want, but you have a film, and according to this, you have a film that's on Prime.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things where, as a filmmaker, as an artist, as a writer, I think we made it in 2005, and it was pretty soon after I started to get in the business. And, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, I'm very proud of it on its face, but also I'm hyper, like, it's one of those things, like, you know, I'm sure you get this, like, you look back and you're like, oh, I should have known to do this. I should have known to do that. But then you have to, like, separate yourself and go, you know what? I didn't go to film school. That was my film school. I didn't, you know, I made a feature film while I acted in it, and I was the first AD. Like, now I would look back and go, God, were you insane? Like, so many things that I messed up, but I learned so much from. So I jokingly, you know, in a self-deprecating way, I jokingly put it down, but, you know, I'm proud of it. But at the same time, you know, the average person looks at it and they're like, oh, that movie's not good. But they don't realize, you know, it's hard for them to put it, even people in the industry, you know, it's hard for them to put it in perspective, to understand, like, wow, these guys made a feature for 49 grand and got Oscar nominees in it, and everybody in the, like, literally everybody in the movie has a legitimate resume. Out of Houston, Texas. You know, was the script great? Probably not. It was written in 4 days, and I'm more of a comedy writer and not an action writer. Probably a bad choice for that. Probably should have gone with my comedy. But, you know, you live, you learn, and, you know, for what it was, it's a thing, you know.
Yeah.
More than anything else, it, like you said, it kind of is that getting over that hump of, like, actually doing it, which is a big barrier for a lot of people. And it's also a barrier because I remember I did it and then I didn't do anything for a couple of years, because it's like, you all often in this industry, you do something and you're like, okay, I did it now. Now what? Now when is everything going to start coming to me? And that's, I think you touched on something that's very important in this industry. often, especially as an actor, we start getting in this mentality of waiting on the world and stuff to happen for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a dangerous cycle to get into.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I saw The Shawshank Redemption maybe when I was 16 or 17. But there's a scene in that movie that always stood out for me. And there's obviously there's a number of scenes, you know, like the big emphasis on hope and patience and solidarity and perseverance. But Tim Robbins' character, Andy Dufresne or whatever his name is, building that library, and he keeps writing these letters over and over again. He wrote a letter every day, every other day to some government official, some grant house or something to get a couple of bucks. I think, you know, at that time it was $10, you know, $10 is like $1,000 now or whatever, but to get $10, $20 or something to buy books, to put into the library that they were building. And so he kept writing them every day, probably for a year. Finally they sent him a check for what he was asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it was either Morgan Freeman's character Red, or it was William Sadler's character, who I can't remember the name of. William Sadler, he was also in you know, Demon Knight. But anyway, he was that white guy that liked to drink beer on the rooftop. So either Morgan Freeman or William Sadler said to him, he goes, "All right, you done writing those letters?" He goes, "No, now I'm writing 2 a day." And that always stuck with me. It's like, okay, now work twice as hard.
Yeah.
I see, I broke through. There's a crack. There's a crack now. And that's exactly what he was doing with The Wall when he was trying to escape. He was picking a little bit every day, picking a little bit, throwing it every day, writing a letter, picking a little bit at the wall, writing a letter, picking a little bit at the wall. And that's how he escaped. That's how he got the money for the library. That's how he escaped. And so when he got that money for the library from writing 1 letter a day, every day he went to the post office and dropped off his letters, which I think they had to screen every freaking day. And this was a huge, like, long scene throughout the whole movie, his whole process of putting that library together. He finally got like a measly 10, 20, whatever dollars, and he goes, "Now I'm going to write 2 letters a day."
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came back from Kuwait in 2015, someone, you know, kind of struck a chord. They said, "Listen, I moved to Albuquerque. I'm acting. You should do the same thing. I mean, all your military background, you should play cops, you play this." I'm like, "Hey, you know what?" I started looking up things in Kuwait, and the second I got home, I went on Craigslist. I didn't know jack shit about Backstage, Actors Access, casting networks. Around here in the DMV, well, East Coast, because also Philly, New York, we have a thing called Dragon UK Connects. This guy Brian Dragonuk started this website specifically for like the DMV plus New York, Philly, Delaware, New Jersey. So like the mid-eastern seaboard states, for a lot of acting gigs around here. So he created his own kind of micro Backstage, which is free to use. But my very first acting gig, I did a couple of shots with a timer on my phone, and then I saw this posting on Craigslist for a crime show, a pretty big budget ID crime show where I played a cop, and I had a close up. I was on screen for like 10 minutes for this episode. And so I was on set, you know, an all right day rate, I guess, for our market. And I was like, shit, went home, threw all that money into better headshots. And I was, and just on set, I was like, what other sites you guys use? And I'm just taking notes, and they start naming off sites. And I just start taking notes, and I just start building sites. So for me, it's not, okay, I had a 5-minute close-up. I had a 10-minute close-up. I had a 15-minute close-up, whatever, no lines, but they'll see me. They'll be like, this guy could play a cop in anything. I'm going to get calls left and right. No, it's like, now it's time to work twice as much. I already kind of cracked the system a little bit. Time to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard. And to the point where I started, you know, setting up all these reminders on my Mac, notes, copy and paste, headshots. And I probably, before the quarantine, I was probably doing 100 to 200 emails a week.
Yeah. It's like running a corporation. People
Yeah.
don't get that, and I'll be the first one to admit I'm not as good as I should be about doing that stuff, about reaching out. Every once in a while I'll reach out to a director that I happen to have a connection with and be like, hey, would love to work with you, blah, blah, blah. It's funny because, you had said, I'm not ashamed to say, I spammed. And it's one of those things where it's funny because it's like there is shame on that, and there really shouldn't be, because I, there's this weird sort of mentality that people get random emails and they're like, oh, what's this? And it's like, well, what it is potentially an opportunity that you're shutting down even before you look at it.
Mhm.
Because we've all been in that situation where, like when you first started acting, when I first started acting, you're like, what do I do? And people are not as inclined as they should to be like, hey, let me give you a leg up, let me give you some information, or let me introduce you, because I think they forget that they did the same thing. I don't know anybody in this industry, aside from people that have been handed their career due to nepotism or whatever, that shouldn't just be open, at least to be like, hey, okay, Glenn, what is it that you're doing on this podcast you're at least that one question. And then you can give yes or no. And then you can say, listen, don't email me again. But at least be open, because, it could be something where, it's a great opportunity. I have 2 times in my career where I kicked myself because I did that kind of same thing where I dismissed opportunities and one was I got a call from this director and he's like, we've been casting forever. And, I just saw your tape and I'd like you to read for this part. I was halfway between Houston and New Orleans, and I was shooting something I was auditioning for some Steven Seagal movie in New Orleans. And so, a real movie, but, of that ilk. And he said, but I need you to come to Dallas, like now, because we want to have this cast by tomorrow morning. And I'm like, oh, dude, that's like 5 hours out of my way and then 5 hours back. Like, I was like, can I do it after this audition? And he's like, no, I got it. And he was just very persistent. And to me, in my mind, I was like, why is this director, like, he just want. And so right there I had this, and I remember a little voice being like, just do it. Just do it. And you can make the Seagal. And I said, no. And it ended up being a movie called Primer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was,
I know Primer.
Of course, there's no guarantee I would have gotten it. Maybe it's just but then again, maybe I did get it. And the other one was, I had an audition and I was asked, they were auditioning in San Diego, and it was a little low budget horror movie. They didn't have any money, and this was before the time when you really could digitally tape your audition and send it easily. And they said, well, are you in the San Diego or LA area? And I was like, well, I'm in Houston. Were you going to be in the area anytime? Could you do that? And I was like, no. And I kind of blew it off because I was like, oh, it's just like a little $20,000 horror movie about 2 young people in an apartment that start having poltergeist. And then, yeah.
Paranormal?
Yep.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, maybe I don't get cast. Maybe I go out to San Diego and waste a bunch of money. But, it was me not being gung-ho, not being like, anything that comes to me, let's be open to and let's just do it.
Yeah.
So, not to say that I wasn't always like that. I was often like that a lot. But those 2 opportunities came to me at both times when I was just not in the mood to be that gung-ho, which sadly, but yeah.
Yeah. And those, you know, little failures are, you know, ingredients for success. You'll always remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole shitload of stuff that I've done. I've probably botched more things than that. And I always remember that. I always remember, you know, like, never again am I going to, oh, I can't drive to Richmond. Richmond's only 2 hours from here. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can drive to Richmond. Maybe not. You know, like there's some productions that are in like Virginia Beach and Newport News is really starting to blow up. Richmond's starting to blow up. So it's like this it's like this tricky balance. But see, it's a little different for me because I'm very experienced with crew as well. So behind the camera as well, you know, shooting, aiding, directing, production management, maybe not line producing, definitely not being a DP. I don't know the science, but I can AC, I can cam op, I can grip, I can gaff, I can maybe not gaff, but I can grip, PA, you know. And so there's all these different opportunities and all these different kind of different markets within this DMV grand market, you know, Maryland, Baltimore, even Delaware, Philly, all these different things that are, you know, decent driving range, decent day rates. I even jumped on, you know, the live streaming tech about 6 years ago and started delving into that. And thank God, because, and I brought this up on the podcast a number of times, is that, you know, as an actor, I'm sure you were kind of trying to figure out what would be a fallback, but you know, as an actor, if you have a fallback, you're going to end up falling back. And so, you know, Schwarzenegger always said, if you want to be successful, there is no plan B. There is only plan A.
Yeah, fortunately and unfortunately for me, I'm actually that rare person who knew from a very young age that I can do nothing else but be an actor or a writer, and which is scary, but yeah, it just kind of forces you to plug on. And
yeah, but for me, I said, okay, bills got to get paid. I want to have kids, want to start a family. I do want to do that. So make sure all the fallbacks are still within film and TV. So you as an actor, your fallback's writing. You as a writer, your fallback's acting.
Yeah.
So with me, I could go either way. I can go crew, I can AD, I can direct, I can produce, I can hold a camera, I can hold a boom pole, I can do anything in sound and camera. I can do live streaming, and I could be technical or producer or run a podcast. Act, you know, and I know where my strengths lie in that. Law enforcement, military roles. I can do a whole bunch of different things and keep that schedule filled, keep the bank account filled, you know, keep food in the fridge and lights on and all that, and the whole nine, and formula for the baby and all that stuff. But again, thank God I always had that fallback. I'm not out there cutting trees. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm not out there cutting trees or you know, working other jobs, you know, hard labor jobs outside of film and TV. I'm able to work remotely doing live streaming for virtual corporate industrial stuff. I'm live streaming that virtually and remotely from this home little hub that I built. Because
so everything you've geared it towards, everything you're doing is in line or in orbit with the main thing you want to do. You're always, which is good, because, you know, if you're on set PAing, you're still meeting people that could be relationships and opportunities, which is great. It's a good thing to do. I mean, you know, you're sacrificing because you've got the brains and ability to do other things, which probably would earn you more money, but in the long run, they're not gonna, you know, selling real estate's not gonna get you the same relationships and opportunities that what you're doing is. So that's great. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I had nothing else.
You mentioned PA. So like I've a lot of these crime shows I've been on and a lot of these acting gigs, just in some of the commercials, people are like, man, you know, there's not a lot of work out here. And I'm like, well, there could be, but if you want to be an actor, but you want to be doing this full time, start applying to PA gigs. PAs get paid pretty well too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like you have to completely know this very specific line of discipline. You're not an AD, you're not a line producer, you're not a cinematographer, you're not a sound engineer or mixer. You're a PA, but you're going to be on set and you're going to learn so much being on set. You can watch the director. You can watch the director and the actors work together. You can watch how stand-ins work, and then how the actors process goes. If you happen to be there, you're not going to be sitting there, all 12 hours the whole day.
Yeah.
You're going to run around doing PA work. But after a gig, after just a couple of gigs of PA work, you're going to start seeing what the director expects from an actor. And then when you go back on another set as an actor, you have a better insight as to what not only the crew have to deal with doing 12-hour days. As an actor, I rarely have ever done 12-hour days. As crew, I've done more than over 12-hour days.
Yeah.
So that's why I love doing acting, man. I get there, I get a staggered call time, sit in the green room, munch on some snacks. Oh, you ready for me? Okay. All right, you're wrapped. And it's like I've been on set a total of 3-4 hours, and I'm getting paid probably just as much as a crew member.
Yeah.
But that's where, like, they sent me size. I got to memorize stuff the day before, study up the day before. So that's where I make up for that work, is the night before, the day before, the week before. But I can do that from the comfort of my own home on the couch. So, but as a PA, you'll see shit, man. Like, these grips and these electricians are like wiring stuff and putting the stands and the lights. Oh my God. The sound guys got to test things, and the camera guys are constantly like moving the camera and doing like test shots. And that's crazy. And the director and the AD are like the first ones on set. Oh my God. Wow. And then the director's like working with the actors. So as an actor doing PA work, you're going to learn a lot of what the director wants and what the whole crew is going through. Because I've been on some sets and actors are like, why am I sitting here for hours? I'm like, dude, they're setting up. Relax.
Yeah.
In the instructions, they said, bring a book. I bring a book. I bring my laptop, iPad, iPhone, and I'm booking shit, man. The only time I'm kind of a semi of a diva on set is I'll say, is there Wi-Fi here? Oh, okay. Let me go. I'm like, dude, if you pass out the Wi-Fi to the cast, they're going to be fucking content.
Yeah.
They will leave you the fuck alone. I'm telling you. You give me the Wi-Fi, I'm sitting here booking gigs for the rest of the year, and I could probably send you paperwork. Like, you don't need to hand me these hard copies, these W-2s or these I-9s or whatever the hell we got to fill out. I can do it online, email it to you, boom, digital. If I have Wi-Fi, I mean, I can do hotspot on my phone if I have to, but there's no service here. All these different little parameters. That's where, I might be somewhat of annoying, but once I get that Wi-Fi, you're never going to see or hear me until I'm on set, until you pull me in front of camera. But it's like, other actors are like, man, I'm just sitting here for hours, and they pull me on set for 10 minutes and they do some takes, and then they pull me back here and I'm sitting here for hours. I'm like, bro, relax. Enjoy yourself, man. Like, enjoy that semi diva life. You're relaxing. You're not putting up lights like they are.
Yeah. I think also, your military service probably kind of prepares you for that. And I know my upbringing sort of prepared me. Like, I don't ever get bored. Even if I don't have a phone, I just go into my head, and I don't think I've ever been pissed on set. And I don't know, I haven't met anyone who's ever had a longer work day than me, but I once had 27 hours on a movie and straight. And that was actually a major production. They had rented a military hangar in Louisiana, and they had a deadline, and they were like, it was cheaper for them to just keep me on set than to let me go. And so 27 straight hours, I did my first scene because they needed me for one actor. And then he left, and then the next actor was coming in the next morning. And so I just sat in my trailer for 27 hours. I don't even know what it would be called. It went well beyond gold time, platinum time, whatever. Sitting in my trailer, took a nap, walked around, looked at the planes, went to Crafty, went back to Crafty, went to Crafty again. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where, but you know, different mentalities get into the business for different reasons. And I think that also, you know, it can often be that people get in without the real love of the craft. And I think also, which benefits, because I've, like you, I've done everything from PA to first AD, and I tell people, man, if you want to get this, those are probably the two jobs that will prepare you the most, PA and first AD, and you will know and have a deeper understanding of what the business of making films and TV is all about. And once you have that appreciation, it kind of like mellows you out. And the worst thing that can happen is somebody gets a big studio production, their first job, and then they're just expecting that. You know, I did a movie with a person that was a relatively well established former huge star, but maybe not a star anymore. And the expectations, you know, get to a level where it's like they kind of forget what it's like that 90% of America or 90% of the world is, you know, metaphorically digging a ditch while you're complaining about sitting waiting for everybody else to dig the ditch. You know, so yeah, it's not a bad life. It's enjoy it while you're doing it, because I remember so like two guys that had a real big impact on me. One's Charles Durning, who I got to be really close with, and the other one is Jack Klugman from Quincy MD fame, and just a really underrated actor, great guy. And they were both Broadway guys. The Odd Couple is his other big one. But Charlie introduced me to Jack, and I got close to these guys at the end of their lives, which is funny because then a couple years later, there's this little side note, and just talking about like how the industry is funny. So in 2014, I tore my Achilles really badly, had to have surgery, and then I split with my longtime business partner, and I kind of like rebuilt 2015, 2016, 2017. I kind of like had to rebuild my whole career, and I was doing production work, and I was working for this commercial company, and I hit it off with one of the guys who's one of the creatives. And after working with him for probably 6, 7, 8, 9 jobs, he drops that, you know, my dad was an actor, but I didn't go into that. And I was like, oh, who was your dad? And he goes, Jack Klugman. And I go, I used to have dinner with Jack once a month with Charlie Durning, and this small world of like knowing the same people. At any rate, the reason I bring them up is, you know, Jack dealt with throat cancer, I believe it was. And, you know, Charlie just being an older guy, but, you know, both of them towards the end of their lives, they're like, we just want to work. We just want to work. No one will hire us. Like, and you start to see, and I saw Charlie on low budget productions where he was just content being on set, just sitting there waiting for his line. And at 84, knew all his lines and was sharp as a tack, but less roles, and people they forget you, you know. And Jack, you know, people were afraid due to his cancer and the surgeries that he couldn't do the roles. But it's sad when somebody that's their whole existence and joy is acting, and they just don't get to do it anymore.
Yeah, there's I think it's Ned Beatty. if I'm not mistaken. You know, and you bring up a great kind of philosophical thing that these guys aren't washed up. It's just for some reason they're not getting this work because it's like they had their moment. The Odd Couple, they had their moment. Quincy M.E., they had their moment. Charles Durning had his moment. You know, like all these, he was like that wiser old man in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, what can he do in the 2010s? And it's like, dude, the guy's still a great actor.
And there's less, I mean, there's less roles written for 80-year-olds. There's less people thinking about them. And then the other thing is, quite often, and this kind of goes back to, you know, I remember Charlie saying to me, you know, if you have any friends that are doing, I have a Charlie impersonation, but I won't do it. If you have any friends that are doing movies, like, let them, you know, if they got a role for me. And I'm like, what? It's like, it breaks your heart. He's like, dude, you're an icon, you're a legend, and you're saying to me, like, if I happen to know any independent filmmakers, they have anything to give you. And I'm like, and sadly, I would tell people I know, hey, you know, I can get you Charlie Durning. You know how it is doing a movie. Like, people are like, oh, I can get you this person, I can get you that person. I tell people I can get you Charlie Durning, and they would be like, who's that? And I'm like, okay, one, take the time to look him up. And sometimes people will look him up and be like, yeah, but he's old. And I'm like, but this is having a legend in your movie.
Yeah.
This is having a legend. And they're like, but you know, he's a character actor. And I'm like, he's a legend character actor.
But he's an actor.
Yeah.
He's an actor.
He's legit. So it's that thing, like, you know, the industry forgets you.
Yeah, and I think the industry needs to be filled with more. It might be costly, but the industry needs to be filled with more nostalgic minded people, you know, and who appreciate. So, you know, going back to Ned Beatty, I watched this movie called Rampart with Woody Harrelson. Rampart was like a crooked cop, crooked LA police, and I think it was taking place late 90s, but it came out in 2011, but I think it took place in like 99, 98 or 99. And Ned Beatty played like a retired police captain or commissioner or something who still had pull and was kind of looking out for Woody Harrelson, you know, trying to like help him through these constant screw ups that Woody Harrelson was having on the force. But like Ned Beatty was just an evil, rotten dude. And it's like, yes, maybe it was magically written, you know, for like an older guy that Ned Beatty could fill this role. But you still see like Ned Beatty still got it, you know, and maybe Clint Eastwood found like this, okay, there's not going to be roles for an 80-something-year-old, so I'm going to start directing. And Charles Durning, maybe Ned Beatty never really got into writing and directing. And so now it's just like, well, I still got to work, so I got to play whatever role I can get. I got to jump on any production I can get. You know, Clint found that fallback, you know? He was like, here's my fallback. I can't be acting in a lot of the stuff that I used to be able to act in, but I can direct just about anything. And he's proven that. And he's still directing. I mean, Christ, he just came out with a Richard Jewell Jewell, yeah. And
I think that also goes to the evolution of the industry and kind of like the old mentality, not just in film, but like kind of everything in life, in that, you know, back sort of basically like when I was in my, you know, late 20s, mid 20s, kind of is when this sort of paradigm shift happened. And I'm sure you probably witnessed this, was when we were younger, it was like, you're an actor or you're a writer or you're a director or you're a producer. And then actors started to really realize, you know what, look throughout history, people like Lucille Ball and these people that were talent, and then Charlie Chaplin, who sort of paved the way. Like, what did they do? Well, you know what? They realized that the power is not just in their talent, but in creating an entity that is a vehicle for their talent. So they start taking control and they start doing, because I remember people being like, oh, well, are you an actor or writer? And I'm like, well, I do both. And they're like, well, you got to pick one. I'm like, do I really need to, like, where's this book that says I need to pick one? Like, I remember my grandmother being like,
and
well,
you kind of struck accordingly, but you go ahead. Your
yeah,
grandma.
like, you know, my grandmother kind of was like, you know, you need to pick a job and like do it. Like that was that mentality. And even though people throughout history, like the Chaplins and the Lucille Balls and these people that I mentioned, like overcame that, it wasn't really like commonplace. They were like these special, you know, people out there. Whereas nowadays, I don't know an actor who doesn't consider themselves also a writer and director, because it's become this thing where it's just like people think they can do everything but don't actually do everything. So it's kind of shifted where it's kind of lost the the grandeur when somebody's actually all of those things. Like so yeah. What was the core?
But yeah, you struck a chord with me, because everybody needs to have like this specific title of you. You know, like you are this, and it's like it's not that simple, you know.
Yeah.
And so I try to simplify it, and I try to put an umbrella under it, and my work shows for it. And I just tell people I'm a filmmaker, you know. But people are like, well, you're a professional actor, and I'm like, dude, I'm an actor, I'm a stuntman, you know, I'm a writer, director, producer, AD, sound, camera. Like, I'm not gonna put all that on the marquee.
Yeah.
Glenn Nelson, filmmaker, because actors in a way are still a part of the filmmaking process. So an actor could go out and legitimately say, and only acting, someone that only ever acted. Charles Durning could say he's a filmmaker. You know, someone who's never directed, but I mean, Chris Evans, Captain America. I don't think he's ever directed anything. I don't think. I mean, nowadays it's so much more open. Nowadays, you never know. There might be something indie he did direct, but but let's just look at the grand scheme of things. He's Captain America, but he's a filmmaker, right? And the writer is a filmmaker, and you know, even down to a PA. A PA is a filmmaker. I mean, I had a. But yeah. So where was I going with that? Yeah. So like everyone's like, well, what are you now? I mean, now you're acting. I'm like, bro, I'm still a filmmaker, man. I just added another skill set within filmmaking because I have to fill up the schedule, and I'm good at playing law enforcement and military roles. I have my, you know, acting school. I have my method acting.
Yeah.
What's your method acting? Well, I've been doing it I've been in the Guard for 10 years. So there's my method. There, you know, De Niro drove a cab for three months before Taxi Driver. I did, coming up, you know, when my, you know, I deployed once, you know, a bunch of travels, you know, just basic training in MP school is like enough to like check that box.
Oh,
like,
yeah. But like, yeah, that's stuff that you can't, I mean, people that try and play certain roles, and I know you especially watch it when you watch a movie and you watch from simply, you know, racking gun to doing other more technical things where you're just like, ugh, like you can't even learn it by being like, you know what, I'm gonna go on base and watch these guys and like learn it. It's like, no,
you're not allowed on base.
Yeah.
You don't have
well, I mean, like if you're Tom Cruise, I'm sure you get some sort of ability to.
Well, then that's when you're at Tom Cruise level. Tom Cruise, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, but my point being, there's watching, and then there is living it to the point where the activity becomes truly a part of you,
like muscle memory. Yeah,
second nature, muscle. Nature, absolutely. It's you know.
And then there were times, and I just recently learned, you know, a whole bunch of like now all these legalities as I started delving into producing and try to create my own, you know, slew of series and brands, that I was watching something, and this guy, you know, this guy's This guy's going to Christmas dinner with his girlfriend's family, and she picked him up from the airport, and he's in uniform, and it says Army, but his rank is upside down. And I'm like, who in the shit did that? Because there's some sort of legality when it comes to military and or police in filmmaking that you have to, not only at the end credits, this is a work of fiction, but you have to like separate visually. There has to be a visual separation from between fact and fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So someone can't sue the film and be like, oh, you're representing this sergeant that I know, and it's like, there's no way, because his rank was upside down. It's a complete fiction. They biffed it on purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I've played I played a major in an episode, Major Pain, by the way, which I thought was amazing. But I played a major in House of Cards, and everything was to the T. Like they measured it. Everything was 100% accurate, which boggles my mind because none of that equated when they're trying to like purposefully get something wrong to avoid any legalities. That's
weird. I've never heard that before. That's
I'm not explaining it right. I know I'm not explaining it right, but like they'll put on the wrong rank on purpose so that they can't get sued or some shit. I don't know. But then House of Cards is 100% accurate to a point. House of Cards is so accurate. I took a look at the uniform. Like I went in for a fitting. They fitted me. And I was looking at everything. I was like, this looks pretty like, legit. For me. It was Army and I'm Army Guard. So we pretty much are Army standard in the Guard. And so I'm looking at this. Now I'm an NCO. This was like, an officer, a high ranking officer, but everything looked super legit, and they were measuring it, and they were using the same app I use for my uniform. And they're like, taking quarters, and they're taking measuring tapes and rulers and all that shit. And then I get on set. And so it's all, so okay, real quick, the scene is there's a whole bunch of like high brass in the green room of this big campaign trail, and all this brass that's hanging out with the guy that played Flag on Suicide Squad. His name is Joel Kinnaman. So the actor Joel Kinnaman played some presidential candidate that was
I remember that.
So we're in this room where he comes in to like have coffee, and then he goes on this big stage, but then there's this room behind the stage, and then there's all this brass hanging out back there because, they were all this big dog and pony show on the stage on the front, but then they go to this room in the back. So there's like 6 males and 1 female. And I was a major. There was like a Navy admiral. There was an Air Force captain. Then me again. I was a Army major. Then there was an Army Sergeant First Class, Army Major, Army Sergeant Major, Army Sergeant First Class. And then, are you familiar with military ranks?
Yeah, as I said, my grandfather who raised me was an admiral. He was the vice jag. Yeah, so I grew up on Navy bases and Air Force bases all around the country.
What rank do you think the female was?
She was probably an admiral.
No, she was Army.
Oh, she was Army?
Yeah.
She was a general.
Nope.
What?
She was a specialist, an E4.
Oh.
I turned to the guy and I said, I don't know who writes this shit. You are 100% accurate. 100% accurate. Now I'm not gonna say anything disparaging. I'm not gonna say, who does what with who, where, when in the Army. But admiral, major, captain, lieutenant colonel, general, sergeant major, sergeant first class, and then a specialist. Like a specialist is 1 rank up again, private. There's private, first class, specialist, then sergeant. And the female was a specialist. I was like, you guys do your fucking homework. That is baffling. But then again, it's like, okay, so they're like 100% accurate. And then they're not getting sued. But I forget. I don't even know how we got off on this tangent. But yeah. Yeah, like I'll see stuff. Yeah. And I've been on set playing cops. I've been on these crime shows where I was a cop. I was a cop approaching the car. Like some guy had killed himself, but we didn't know that. And I was approaching the car and I'm like all tactical. And the other guy's like doing the Bruce Willis. He was like running up to the car, like his arms all like super extended. I'm like, that's not how it's done. Let me help you.
Yeah. I remember when certain movies came out and I had buddies who had just gotten back, and I'd had friends here that never served, and they were like, oh, that movie's great. And then I had buddies who actually dealt with the subject matter and were like, I hate that movie. And the people here would be like, why? Explain it, justify. And like, because it's like, one was Hurt Locker, and I had a buddy who was a Marine, and he was like, this is just not true. And they're like, yeah, but it's dramatic. And he's like, yeah, but it would never happen. And they're like, yeah, but it's like really well done. And he's like, yeah, but it would never happen. Like, so therefore it's not well done because it doesn't, like, it's not something in reality.
Yeah. No, I loved Hurt Locker. I thought Hurt Locker was phenomenal. But but you're right. You're absolutely right. There is no way 2/3 of that shit would have ever happened. Like, like if I was EOD, there's no way I'm chasing some guy down the street. No way. If I'm EOD, there's no way I would be out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere with just a 3-man team trying to like snipe dudes. Like, why are they out there? What are you doing?
He's like, I'm gonna sneak off base. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna go find this kid. Nah, man. I'm write a report. I'm writing a report and I'm sending it up, and I'm gonna stay in my barracks.
Let me there's a bomb and it's not threatening anybody, but I should just go ahead and defuse it and risk my life instead of sending in the what is it called? What's the unit that
the robo?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I get the adrenaline thing. I get it. Like that I understand.
Yeah, but within the protocols of the military and the mission, like his what am I looking for? His contemporaries would not allow it. His superiors, his SO, his peers,
his peers wouldn't allow it.
His SO, that like I try to tell people it just wouldn't happen, and they're like, but what if it just wouldn't happen.
If something happened right in front of him, right there and then, like basic combat skills and defense.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go chase that guy. No, we're not. I'm calling MPs, man. He's already out of view. He's not a direct threat to us anymore.
Yeah.
Call the MPs. They'll go track him down. I'm not chasing that dude down.
Yeah.
But
didn't he punch his? They say SO and SCO.
He punched his commanding officer. You know what? And I'm not going to say how accurate that might be or not. But what I will say is when Anthony Mackie went up to James Renner,
Jeremy
Renner, when Anthony Mackie walked up to him, punched him, and said, "Don't you ever take your fucking comms off on me again." 100% accurate. 100% accurate. Like cracked him in the mouth. Dude, don't you ever take your comms off when I'm talking to you. 100% accurate. But like EOD guys sniping, they're like, okay, what's the windage? Like, how would you know that shit?
Yeah.
That's not that. How would you know that shit? Come on. Ridiculous.
I think that was actually a exact conversation I had with somebody, and their reply was, well, he could have learned it like in his spare time. And I'm like,
okay. But like, no, listen.
We're getting into the realm of the Taken movies. And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, what
No,
this
Taken's
movie,
accurate. Taken's
yeah,
100% accurate. All three of them, by the way.
yeah. Well, I will say the fact that Liam Neeson will hunt you down and kill you is a 100% accurate.
probably
Uh,
pretty accurate. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the first one without a doubt, and then it got a little bit more ridiculous, and then even way more ridiculous. But
Yeah, but those movies allow for a suspension of disbelief, and it's levels. It's levels. Could a guy like that take on a whole? Well, and would a firefight in the middle of Paris not bring 500 cops? Okay, so like you get into the layers of but whereas Hurt Locker is supposed to be in a realm of more realism, and that's why that I feel like that gets, and people that have no background in it don't really separate the two. They're like, oh, it's an action movie. I'm like, either one is just as feasible. And I'm like, no, not really.
hey, listen, if Hurt Locker dealt with 9 to 12 different guys instead of just 3,
Yeah.
and then it just jumped to like another 3 different guys chasing after that guy, and then jumped to another 3 different guys that lost out in the desert and sniping that dude. I get that, because it's still they're still gonna discuss, the addiction to adrenaline and the addiction to that kind of lifestyle and that kind of profession. But it was the same dude, like this guy's just Superman. He's gonna do everything.
Yeah.
That's the break from reality.
Yeah.
But I think I think now that we're talking about the new normal and and a break from the old way of thinking when it comes to filmmaking and stuff like that, and we'll touch upon that in a second. But it's like, I think we can do movies where we followed one guy for like 30 minutes and then he just disappears, and it's somebody like Jeremy Renner and Anthony Mackie playing this one team, and then say that one scene where they bumped into that dude that they chased down the alley or something, and they called somebody else. And so the somebody else that comes is like a 2-man team played by 2 totally different actors that go chase him down. Now that's who the movie's following for 30 minutes, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I maybe not that specific script, but I don't know. I'm going off on a weird tangent. But moving on, and we'll kind of moving on, because I kind of touched upon it. What's next on the agenda? What's next? What's the next set of goals and next on the agenda for Jason KONOPISOS-ALVAREZ?
Well, I'm kind of spinning a lot of plates. It's one of those things where you try and keep a lot of, not to use too many cliches, but try and keep a lot of hooks in the water, because you don't know which one's going to get. So it's hard to say what's next. I have a film called Tijuana. It's a comedy. It's kind of like Big Mama's House, but for the Latino audience. And Javier Chapa is a guy who's producing it. We wrote it together. Great director Alex Montoya Marin is directing it. I mentioned him earlier. He has a movie coming out called Millennial Bugs. We are kind of in the weird COVID pre-production thing where we're sort of slowly, it's sort of this amalgamation of pre-production and development at the same time, because we're moving forward, but we're not really moving at the speed you typically would move in pre-production. He actually just called me while we were on, so maybe that's good news. I think we're talking to a couple different distributors already. We're supposed to be shooting that in, I believe, San Antonio, Texas. We might shoot in Albuquerque. Got that. I'm actually talking to a friend of mine, James Pippy, about a web series, or not a web series, sorry, a podcast that we've been kind of bantering around for a while. Unfortunately, we should have done it before or during the lockdown, because it would have, I feel like it would have been great, during this time. great time for it. But it's about exploring kind of like conspiracy theories. And I know there's a ton of those podcasts already, but I think we have a different, as I said, my grandfather was in the JAG, in the Pentagon, and I was kind of raised around a lot of that. And I feel like my grandfather had pretty high level clearance, and he had an interesting perspective on a lot of things. But we wanted to do a podcast talking about some of those things from that perspective, which is a perspective I don't feel like a lot of people touch on. I feel like it's generally like the people that deem themselves skeptics, and kind of quite often, to my understanding, like, so often I hear people that are skeptics, and they'll reference, like, for example, JFK assassination, they'll reference like the Warren Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, well, did you read the Warren report? And they go, no. And I'll say, well, you can't really be a true skeptic on something if you haven't actually read the materials. And then there's the other side, which is, the more fervent conspiracy theory believers that, at the same on the same note, flip the other side of the coin there. I'll talk to them and I'll say, well, did you read the Warren Commission report? And they'll say no. So kind of, we wanted to find ourselves somewhere in the middle, and having been really well researched on it, and provide a different voice. That, and then, I've got 2 comedy sitcoms I'm finishing up that we're supposed to be filming by now, but with the lockdown, that's not going to happen. And other stuff, just writing an animated feature. And a friend of mine recently, who's an executive at a network, came to me about doing a COVID lockdown film about an apartment complex, and kind of the the inner workings of people's lives and whatnot. And so just got a lot of stuff, and like with a lot of people in the industry, don't really know which one will take off. And when that starts to take off, you grab on and hold on to that until it stalls, and then you grab onto the next thing that's starting to get traction. So that's the next thing, whatever the next thing is.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of which, what's your view of, see, it's kind of, I guess, the what we've been calling it is the new normal. But in the last couple of months, a lot of my guests, we've been really just calling it progression. And even more so, all the tools that we've been using, we've been doing this way before the quarantine anyway, like Zooming and FaceTiming, virtual podcasts, and that sort of deal. I remember so many conferences that I was doing live streaming at. There's always a guest or two that are Skyping in. And so now it just seems to be, but what's your view of what I guess we're still calling the new normal?
Well, there's a couple different aspects on that. So one of the aspects would be the health side, which I think that, so I'll go through it. There's the health side, there's the creative, interpersonal, business side, and then there's the, personal, like, private life side. So I think with all 3 of these, I think we're going to see sort of a pendulum swing, in that I feel like the pendulum is very far to the right or left, however you want to phrase it. I'm not being political, but I feel like it's very far to one side, and I feel like it's going to come back and swing to the other side, and then to the middle. And right now, I feel like a lot of people can only imagine it on the side it is. And what I mean by that is, I've talked to people who are like, we are always going to have to wear masks on set, and we're always going to have COVID protocol on set, and this is going to be the new normal, and people are going to work from home, and people are only going to, Skype from now on, and da-da-da. And I feel like that's sort of a view that happens when you're in it. But the fact of the matter is, people forget, people get complacent, people get comfortable, and you know, as bad as COVID is, it also is one of just a series of these type of illnesses that come around periodically. So, you know, it seems very big now, but in the grand scale, when we have COVID 20 and 21 and 22 and 23, people aren't going to, that perception is going to change. And I don't think that it's going to remain this thing of like wearing hazmat suits on set and getting your temperature checked, you know, every day when you come to set. I feel like it's going to go back to kind of where we were before. I think people, a good portion of people are going to be more mindful of, you know, sanitizing and washing hands and space, and stuff like that, because being on set, as you know, can be a very dirty and, you know, tumultuous thing where, you know, people are reaching in the nuts and the crafty table and this and that. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes that are good, but I don't think we're headed for, I think we're going to get back to a normalcy that it looks very familiar. I think on the business side and the creative side, I think people, again, people are like, we're only going to use, I think that's true. I think people are going to more comfortable with Zoom and stuff like that and find it more convenient, because it is more convenient. Like if you and I are having a conversation, I'm sure you've had these meetings where you drive and you meet somebody and you have a conversation that really is not fruitful. You know, it's more like a feeling out type thing.
But even more so, 2-3 years ago, I had a Skype audition, alive, and not a self-submit. I had an audition where I read with somebody on Skype.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to take, you know, not to cut you off, but we're going to take we're going to take the conveniences of this. Obviously, you know, the pandemic's temporary. We're going to get a vaccine. The flu killed people 100 years ago, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, COVID.
And we're going to have other, and like I said, we're going to have other COVIDs and other, there's going to be different things. And, you know, I just had a network meeting with, you know, casting director, producer of the show, creator of the show, executive in charge. And it was interesting, but I will say this, I think as much as it's convenient and people are like, oh, this is so convenient to have these meetings and this and that, I do think people are going to realize there's something to be said about being in the room with somebody, feeling their energy, and there's a certain unnaturalness to Zoom.
Oh yeah.
Because you're sort of engaging, but you're in your comfort area of your house. Look at this guy. You want to see a supermodel? Look at that. That's the next big star in film and TV. Yeah, he was doing his little Zoolander. But you know, it's this weird thing of you're in your comfort zone, but you're engaging with the people. And there's a much different dynamic that comes when you meet people in person. Just like table reads. I've done some table reads on Zoom. Table reads on Zoom and table reads in the room with each other, very different.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like people are going to realize that difference and get back to it.
Oh no. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh yeah. No wait.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Is that my? Okay, go ahead. Let's start over. Let's just start over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Is there a delay? Are you frozen? Are you frozen?
And likewise in the personal world, people, you know, there's a lot of people that are like, you know, I don't really ever have to leave my house anymore. I realize that, but you need that interaction.
Of course.
Things special, like with table reads, special things happen when you're in person and having that interaction, like when you're on stage, like that magic happens that doesn't happen on Zoom.
But you nailed it. There is this convenience, and I think there's going to be this budgetary convenience as well.
Yeah.
Where the callbacks can be in person.
Yeah.
And of course, the table read, in my opinion, has to be in person. You can't you can't do a Zoom table read. Obviously now, as it, you know, right now that Zoom is making it possible to do anything with anybody at any time.
Yeah.
But you're right, that energy for a table read, that energy for a callback. This guy was great. He passed, but you know, years, decades after this pandemic, this quarantine, yeah, like self submits, and then a live in person Skype thing for like the first callbacks, then the second callbacks, because you can knock all that out like day 1, day 2, day 3, and then you know, the callbacks are in a week. That's an in person, but you've chopped it down. You've narrowed it down to like 3 guys, 3 girls, another 3 guys, and those are your, you know, 3 to do the 2 males and female lead roles of the film. You've already narrowed it down, and so in my opinion, everything's going to be much more hybrid, and we're going to take a look at this cost and time ratio. Like you nailed it, man. Driving to
an audition,
driving to a coffee meet. I drove, and I wasn't even close. It was like a 10-minute drive, but I drove from, I had to drive to College Park for a coffee meet with the guy that claimed to be the inspiration behind Kramer on Seinfeld. And so wait a second,
I gotta say, that just sounds like one of the crazy people you meet in the business who's like, hey, I got this idea for a movie, Glenn, I'd like you to produce it. You know, by the way, I was the inspiration for Kramer. And you're like, what?
So he told me that on the phone. So I'm meeting him at, no, he told me that in the email. We exchanged a couple emails. I'm supposed to meet him at this coffee shop. I get to the coffee shop. I call him. I'm like, hey, I'm here. And he goes, hey, I forgot his name. I'm like, hey, it's Glenn. He goes, I'm in a meeting right now. And I'm like, you're supposed to be in a meeting with me. I'm here at the Starbucks. He goes, let me call you back. I'm in a meeting right now. And then I found him as he's on the phone, and I get into his face. I'm like, sir, it's me. I found you. How you doing? I'm Glenn. And he's like, oh, hey. I get these calls all the time. I'm like, here we go. Bullshit artist. If we had done this on Skype or Google Hangouts or now Zoom, we wouldn't have had this issue. I would have waited you out.
Yeah.
And so I had to sit there.
Yeah.
Like for like a cup of coffee when I could have been home, probably knocking out stuff. My stuff.
Or having 3 other meetings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Three other, you know, I'll make a cup of coffee. You make a cup of coffee. We'll sit here and we'll drink coffee on Skype. It's
also, you can pull the ripcord because you can be like, so I don't know if this meeting is going that well. Goodbye.
Exactly.
Like, we got disconnected.
And then write him an email like an hour later. My internet went down. Let me get back to you.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
And so that could be the first, second, third. This virtual thing can be the first, second, and third tier thing. It can alleviate so much travel issues, you know, like like I said, I'm doing a lot of these virtual conferences, and still these doctors are like, oh, I had like this last minute patient, you know, these medical conferences or whatever the case, and this doctor is like this last minute patient. They would not have what would have happened if they flew all the way out to Nashville, stayed at this hotel for 5 days. They had this last minute emergency patient with like a brain tumor. Are they going to fly all the way back? Are one of these high profile, highly needed, what's the word? Highly needed specialist doctors, surgeons, they can do the virtual thing, and everything can be hybrid. So sure, you've got your MC for the conference for the 5 days is at the Marriott in Nashville. You got your film crew and your live streaming techs there at the hotel, at the conference center, wherever in Nashville. But 50% of the people are just zooming in.
Well, more than that, like I'm not even just zooming in, but actively participating. I have a friend who just did a commercial, and the DP Skyped in to the production and was basically had a person handling, and I think there's even like the thing where they have the little rolling wheels with the iPad, and then you can drive around and you have your face on it, which is weird.
That's
But
awesome.
you know, then I think in medicine there's the Da Vinci machine where you can have a surgeon halfway across the world, like with his hands and or her hands in a thing, doing the surgery through this machine, which is, you know, that's the future. Maybe
That's
just
the future.
no one actually even being there, just a bunch of little iPads on wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, somebody called me. I remember it was like '08. No, it was earlier than that. Maybe it was '05. Somebody called me and said, I don't know if I want to tell the story, but
That's always
well,
the best.
okay. So I'll leave out some details, but it was a prank. And they said, we want to use this thing as a prank. And they called me because I was the prank master at the time. They said, what should we do? And I said, oh, okay. Tell me about your day. What's at the house? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then we got this. And okay. Put the thing in the beer case, in the case of beer, and the case of beer in a bag, and have her grab you a bunch of beers. And then when she reaches in, and I directed a prank on the phone. And this was '05. It was a flip phone. It was a Nokia flip phone, you know? So, I mean, it's like, if you can think outside the box like that, it's like DP in a film.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's intricate,
Yeah.
but having it like video conferenced. But yeah, man, I mean, I think, and like you nailed it, man. It's like, it's hybrid. It's just all hybrid. I should probably take that point off of my discussions because there's no point. It's all hybrid, right? But what's the last bit of advice, a last point or two you'd want to make to our viewers?
You know, I think one of the things was something you touched on, and I feel like the biggest enemy for most people in this industry that I know is battling inertia. I know that that's the thing for me, especially like because there's levels of it. So I can be in my apartment very productive writing a script, but at the same time when that script is done, then what? And I think in this industry we often get dependent, reliant, passive in relation to waiting for other people to do things, waiting for agents to make calls, waiting for producers to return calls, waiting for distributors to get back to us, and all these things. And there's only so much you can do, but at the same time, you know, like I know with my own experience, 3, 4, 5 years pass and you go, God, I haven't made a film. And you, like one of the things I pointed out, you know, I've got so many plates spinning, and at some point you have to ground yourself and sort of always have one project that you have full autonomy with, that you can move forward in every aspect of it. I think that's the best way to make yourself feel healthy as a person and as an artist. Have one thing that you have total control over, because so much of this industry, we don't have control over things, and it can be maddening. So even if it's making an iPhone movie that you edit, you know, at night or whatever, I think it's essential. Inertia is the great killer.
Inertia is the great killer. Inertia.
The principle of objects in motion tend to stay in motion, objects at rest tend to stay at rest.
Yeah.
So therefore, unless you're doing and making something, you tend to keep not making something.
Yeah.
And especially, and you know, especially actors and writers, you know, sitting by the phone waiting for that next audition, or as a writer, you know, putting off writing till tomorrow, or, you know, any of the many things that we do, that all can really, it saps your energy to do other things.
Yeah. Because and I got some colleagues that it's like, listen, man, And I always give them that same philosophy. It's like, dude, you banged out a track. You banged out a track this year. It was quarantine. It was slow, but you got back into it, and you just finished a track this year. Make 2 more.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, 2 more. Make 4 more. You know, it's just like Andy Dufresne. It was like, well, they finally answered. They finally replied to my answer. They finally replied to my letter, and sent me $10. Oh,
Yeah.
you done? You done now? Hell no! I'm writing 2 letters a day now.
I think it also be getting this mindset, and it can be discouraging because we see people that are successful. We're like, wow, they're doing so much. They're doing this and they're doing that, and their fame and their money affords them the ability to push through or cut corners to get more stuff done, whereas we have to be more. We have to use ingenuity, and we have to use diligence to push through and get more things done. And that requires, going back to something you touched on, that requires more faith in yourself and more confidence. And it requires more diligence. Sorry, I'm having a cat fight. All my assistants, which they're the worst assistants ever. They get nothing done.
But you know, like a different realm. You know, me and the wife, we started intermittent fasting about a month ago,
Mm-hmm.
and she lost like a pound or 2 here. I lost a pound or 2 there, and she's like, "It's not working." I'm like, "Well, how long have we been doing it?" "Well, we've only been doing it 2 weeks. We got to do it 2 more weeks."
Yeah.
Do it 2 more weeks, and 2 weeks later, oh, I only lost a couple pounds. Well, I only lost a couple pounds. Should we keep doing this? Well, how long have we been doing it? A month now. Do it another month.
Yeah.
That's how working out is. You keep doing push-ups, sit-ups, and run every day, you know, with a day off. Push-ups,
Yep.
sit-ups, run, day off. Push-ups. Well, I'm seeing a little bit of growth. Keep doing it. You've been doing this for a month. Do it another month. Next thing you know, 6 months later, shredded, jacked, no neck, veiny. You know what I mean? And skinny. You know, like all this is all the chicken necks gone.
Yeah, and not to say another cliche, but you know, the journey is the destination, and I think that's something that I've learned, and I try to focus on, is like focus on the doing rather than the actual completion. And whereas, I mean, you know, like we forget that like making movies and TV is fun. It's fun. Enjoy the time on set. Don't think about, oh, when are we going to get off? When are we going to have this shot done? Focus on like getting the shot done. So,
like,
and it's easy to say, and I say it because I have to remind myself, not because I'm some great guru that knows this, but I'm the person that probably the first person that needs to be reminded.
Oh man, you remember when that set dressing just kept falling off, and it just, once you said action, it fell. Oh, you remember once you said action, that bird kept tripping. Oh man, when's lunch? Or when are we gonna wrap? Yeah. Like, dude, I had a lot of fun on set. Yeah, a couple of days went late, a couple of days went early, but you remember that one day where it was like the second we got the lights turned on, it started raining. You know, it's like it's like those are the moments. And then you see the final product. Then you see the film, and you're like, damn, you know, like the film actually came out great. All that headache, but not like daily complaining of when are we gonna wrap? When's lunch? When are we gonna wrap? They're late with lunch. Like, who cares, man? Just, you know, enjoy the moment, live in the moment.
Yeah.
And like you said, the journey is the destination. There was now I'm forgetting it. But oh yeah, that's what it was. Like, even back to basic training, I was heavy. I think I was like 200 when I went to basic training, smoked a pack a day. And just 2 weeks later, they put us in for height and weight. And I had lost 25 pounds because I stopped focusing on minutes and hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, wake up. Okay. And it's much easier. Maybe it is much easier because they tell you what to do. You just do it. They lay out your whole life for you for the next 2.5 months.
Yeah.
3 months, whatever, for basic training. They lay out your whole life. So you wake up, You eat, stuff, eat stuff, doing stuff, training, running, walking, marching, whatever, sleep. And 2 weeks later, it was like I was 175, no neck, and that was just 2 weeks. And then when I graduated, I sent a picture to hadn't had a cigarette in months.
Yeah.
And somehow I was in alpha group. So like when I was kind of getting ready to go to basic, I was doing like, I wasn't running very fast, but somehow I get there and I'm running 7.5 minute miles. So that was like, it was like a 15-minute 2 mile. I was baffled. Like what?
Yeah.
I was a chain smoker 3 weeks ago. And now when they do this preliminary PT test, I was in alpha group.
Mm-hmm.
I was a chain smoker, and now I'm in the alpha group for running. And I'm old. I was like one of the oldest dudes. I was 31 when I enlisted. Like, and it's just the journey. And then the next thing you know, you're going to look in the mirror and you look completely different. So absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. The journey is the destination. I love it.
Yep.
Well, any last socials, links, plugs you want to put out there?
I mean, I'm not a huge social person, but I will just say, if you want to check out what I've done and stuff, go to IMDb, look up Jason KONOPISOS-ALVAREZ. If you can't remember that name, go to The Waiter, or I was in a movie called Idiocracy, which a lot of people tend to know and remember, and they can find me there.
What were you in Idiocracy? I know Idiocracy.
Okay, sir. We're going to proceed to obtain your IQ and aptitude test. I was the cop that arrested him and got him tattooed. And
oh, in the future?
Yeah. Luke
shit.
Wilson. Yeah.
Okay.
But, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. Say hi. I'm around.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, you heard it here. IMDb. And yeah, his name's right here. So just look him up on IMDb. Well, Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Man, I thank you. It was a pleasure. Anytime you want to have me back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do plan on doing that way down the line. Maybe as floodgates start opening, I want to bring my previous guests back and try to do it in that order that I had guests on and be like, okay, you're back on set. You got, okay, the script's greenlit. Tell me about it, blah, 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 blah. So,
the pressure's on to actually do something now.
Yeah, man.
This might be great for my career.
The heat is on.
I can't let you down.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, Jason, again, can't thank you enough for coming on. A lot of great insight, great ideas, inspiration. And to my viewers, I certainly hope I've earned the privilege of your time and viewership. I know my guest has. And until next time, you know what to do.